My name is Cassandra Duran, and for my final Pechakucha project, I will be analyzing Taylor Swift's acceptance speech at the Billboard Music Awards for her Woman of the Decade award. Within this speech, she appeals to her audience in various ways, which I will break down for you. One of the most important factors when speaking to an audience is understanding and connecting to your audience. I will go over three main factors that are essential to appealing to an audience of any kind. These will be identification, pathos, and factors influencing audience perception, which include attitudes, values, and beliefs. To start off, we have identification. The book defines identification as a communicative process through which people are unified into a whole on the basis of common interests or characteristics. Identification is important because it allows you to identify with the audience on a psychological level than simply a demographic level. Next, we have pathos. Our book defines pathos as an artistic proof that leads the audience to feel emotion. Pathos is important because it leads audience members to feel a particular way and creates them in a certain state of mind, which can make them more susceptible to understanding your argument. Next, we have public emotion, which is similar to pathos, except for it affects the audience as a whole. It is defined as collective expressions of feeling that are crucial elements of democratic deliberation, judgment, and action that comprise a language for collective life. Finally, we have values, beliefs, and attitudes. Values are defined as organizing principles and orientations that people use to interpret the world around them. Beliefs are a set of knowledge grounded in people's value orientations, and attitudes are positive or negative feelings towards some person, thing, or idea. For my rhetorical artifact, I chose Taylor Swift's acceptance speech at the Billboard 2020 awards show. She won Woman of the Decade, however, her speech is more than just a thank you. She uses her platform to speak out on issues within the music industry, such as the unequal treatment of women and empowering our youth. Prior to her speech delivery, Swift underwent a public battle to own her own music. When her former label, Big Machine Records, sold rights to her music without her consent to Scooter Braun, someone Taylor would have not approved of, Taylor was stripped of her rights to own her own art, which caused massive controversy and extreme feelings of hopelessness on Taylor's end. Aside from her personal battles, Taylor Swift has been known throughout her career to constantly uplift and empower other women in the industry and as a whole. She preaches and advocates for equal rights across all platforms constantly and made sure to include her ideals and morals within this speech as well. Swift's speech was about 15 minutes long and given in a room full of well known and powerful people in the industry. It was also recorded and aired live, meaning her audience was much broader than just the artists in the room. Swift kept this in mind as she prepared her speech and made sure to use several different approaches when appealing to her very broad audience. Taylor connects and creates identity with two groups within her speech, the first being very broad, the people of the music industry. Because this was at the Billboard Music Awards, the audience was full of people who share the same devotion to music. She uses we phrases to further unite one another while educating them on the issues at hand. Taylor furthers a sense of identity when she calls specifically upon female artists. She drops names of well known and powerful figures in the industry, such as Lizzo, Billie Eilish, and Halsey. By using their names, she creates a sense of unity between all female artists, not just those in the room. Taylor evokes a range of emotions on her audience as a way to help them understand the effects of toxic masculinity. She shares her sense of pride as her career took off, and then follows it with her disappointment at the world for explaining away a woman's success in the music industry. By sharing this difference in emotions, Swift allows the audience members to share and feel her story more clearly. By sharing her personal stories, Swift allowed audience members to share her emotions as well. But she further evokes emotions on the audience as a whole when she shares her specific battles with Scooter Braun and owning her own music. Emotions then switch to public emotions as they are felt throughout the audience, together and as a whole. Taylor was well aware of her audience and knew they all have been through individual struggles with making it in the industry. So when she spoke about failing to gain ownership of her own albums, she created a sense of anger that requires a response. This public emotion was important because without it, the audience may not have felt the urgency to change things. Finally, Taylor finds ways to influence her audience's perceptions, the first being shared values. She directly addresses values when speaking on owning her own music. Freedom to own your own individual artwork is a strong value that many artists in the industry can and will positively connect to. Another play on influencing audience perceptions that Taylor uses is addressing beliefs. A highlight in her speech is when she shares her own personal beliefs. This can be seen when she says, quote, "I really feel like we need to continue to try and offer something to a younger generation of musicians." To further this, Taylor recalls on how she has made this same exact point in past speeches, and that as a music community, we should take steps to do the same. By backing younger generations and acknowledging new Woman of the Year, Billie Eilish, Taylor acts on her beliefs and appeals to her audience full of younger and aspiring new musicians. Swift's entire speech appeals to an audience and affects their attitudes on multiple levels. With a crowd full of artists, their attitudes toward one another may differ, but they do hold similar values and beliefs. By exposing people like Scooter Braun, Swift can switch attitudes in the room, not only about him, but with corporations who operate with similar intentions. To conclude my final Pechakucha on Taylor Swift's Woman of the Decade speech, I leave you with a couple final questions. First, how might this speech be perceived to a crowd of entirely men rather than a room full of women and male artists? And second, how may an audience's bias affect Taylor's argument?